Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next Power of Community and Growth and Goals Mindset workshop. Today, we will be talking about math and how math can be fun. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Andrea Duhan. She's here to teach us how to not be intimidated by math. So I'm excited about that. And I want to give her a quick shout out. She's our Omega Phi Beta Foundation ambassador, but she's also part of Lambda Pi Chi sorority, and they just celebrated 33 years yesterday. So congratulations and welcome.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes, todo el mundo. I am so excited to be here today and get to share one of my passions with you. We're going to go briefly through some of my history so that you can get to know me and who's talking and why I have some sense of expertise. And then hopefully I'll be able to share some great pointers on how you can take mathematics and make it really fun for yourself, for your kids, for your family. And we'll get into some of those activities as well. So a little bit about me. I was born in Colombia. I was raised between there and Venezuela for the first 10 years of my life. And my parents decided to move here, right in that space of elementary. And when I got to the United States, honestly, I was looking for something that I was good at. And I couldn't find much because I didn't speak the language. And I was so intimidated about this, grand change that was happening. But I was sold on an American dream that I thought would be wonderful. But there was one thing that I didn't know, and one thing that kind of caught my eye from the beginning, and that was mathematics. And mathematics got to me very early on and basically got down on one knee and said, would you take this ride with me? Right. And so I always tell my husband that even though we've been married for 11 years and he proposed officially, that I had a proposal that came way before that. And it was that one proposal that will take me on a journey that had a lot of ups and downs, right? So a lot of times me and mathematics got along, and then other times we really struggle. And so it was really that first love in my life, and that one thing that I was able to just learn life with, right? Learn all of the intricacies about that. But it's not always easy when you are in this field. There's a lot of people that don't look like you. As a Latina in mathematics, I never really saw people that looked like me in the classroom. I went into a classroom slightly intimidated and always wondered if I was good enough. Was I going to know enough? Was I prepared enough? Did I have the right background? And because I came from a very humble background, and as my parents moved to the United States, they basically started all over. I didn't have access to a lot of the program, the tutoring, all of this extra things that they had. And so I always felt like I just was one step behind. And I really had to struggle with that idea of having enough knowledge to participate in a room full of people that just didn't align to what I saw myself with. And that was relatively difficult as I went along. But opportunities came along my journey, and doors were open that allowed me to explore fields that maybe I wasn't so comfortable with. And so with a mom that was like a go-getter and had no excuses in the forefront, she always encouraged me to ask for help and to go for things that I wanted. And if I was interested in this ongoing relationship with math, even though it was going to be hard, that I should still go for it. And so I did take her advice, and I went for math and pursued it from very early on. Now, in math, what you know is that it's really about the process and not about the result. Many of us think math is black or white, but the truth is that that's not the case, right? There's a process and learning that takes place, and that's where the relationship with mathematics really develops, right? I have countless times that I was wrong. I have countless problems that I struggled with for over a week. There was so much in that was really difficult, but that's where my relationship grew. That's where I learned how to think. That's where I was able to say, hey, I can tackle any problem, right? Math or not. Because the one thing that mathematics has taught me in my life is how to critically think about situations that I don't know anything about. And so I think it's important for us to fall in love with that process. Like, be so in love that when you struggle, that when you can't figure it out, that when you're at odds, you're willing to continue to strive, you're willing to continue to pursue, and you're willing to overcome all of those barriers to get to the other side. And that's what math was about, right? Math was about that struggle process. Like, we were a great married couple because we were fighting all the time. But now when I look back in the last 30 years of my life, as I'm looking at my relationship with math, I see the beautiful picture that it created. I see all of the things that it taught me along, and I see how some of those lessons really interconnected with the rest of my life. So if you like this field, if you want to go into it, you got to be ready. You got to be ready for that fight, and you got to be ready to lose sometimes, right? I remember being in college and I was in a classroom full of males. There was not one female except for me. And it was the first proof course that I ever took. And when I took that exam, I got a 25%. And my heart was broken because up to there, I thought that I was a good math student. But the average was actually lower than 25%. So I was a little bit above average, but I was so discouraged, right? And it really took everything inside of me and the guidance of some great mentors for me to get over that and say, this is what it's supposed to be about. And truthfully, you only learn if you struggle, right? If everything comes easy, you're just exercising. You're practicing something you already know in mathematics. So it's in that struggle process, it's in those days that math won, that's where the learning happens. And so I encourage everyone who's on this call, parents, kids, anyone who's hearing this, is that whenever you have those moments that you feel like you're not good enough or you don't like math because it's so hard, like, don't give up. Be ready to go and tackle it one more time and understand that in that struggle process, that's where all of the learning is happening. And as I went along in my journey, and when I had this places where I was really struggling to understand the math, I realized that there's always another side, right? I remember being in college and being ready to graduate and thinking I had it all together, and then realizing that I didn't know what was next, right? Feeling like I still wasn't prepared enough. And even though I had been so successful in the grand scheme of things, I didn't have a next step. I didn't have another plan. And so I felt like I was back in that little girl's shoes that didn't really know how to navigate herself. And what I was able to see is that just because I didn't have a plan, or my plan hadn't come to fruition the way that I thought, it didn't mean that my story was going to end there. And it didn't mean that I had to stop pursuing the next level. And one day I remember walking into the math office and they asked me this grand question, like, what are you going to do next? And honestly, I didn't know. So I had to be honest about it and be like, I'm just not sure. And an opportunity laid itself right in front of me when the secretary of the math department said, hey, I just saw this scholarship opportunity for a master's degree. The application is in 2 weeks. You should go for it. And it was the Math for America Newton Fellowship from NYU and Columbia University. And I remember feeling overwhelmed because I had nothing prepared and it was 2 weeks away. But something inside of me said, go for it, because the only thing that can happen is a no. And you're exactly where you are now. And so in that moment, I just was able to see that, like, stories, even though we don't see them as continuous, sometimes they have a ... right? And even though we don't see the end, and even though we only see the barriers, sometimes they just continue. God aligns things in our lives in such an intricate way that when things are for us, they're going to happen. And I believe with everything inside of me that God knew that math was my passion, and that even though my life didn't necessarily align itself from the beginning, that there was going to be a way made for me. And so I did. I applied. I got this fellowship. I was able to go to NYU to pursue my master's. And then from there, decided to keep going and pursue a PhD in the same field. And so, I didn't allow those obstacles to stop my dream. I took those obstacles and created opportunities so that I was able to pursue further from what I ever thought, right? When I was a little girl at 9 years old, just loving math, I didn't know that the end result would be a PhD in the field. It didn't look like that was a possibility. And in fact, if I look around the people who were with me at that time, many of them didn't get these opportunities. But what I did know is that as I navigated life and as I opened up my eyes to see what the world had for me, even though no one looked like me, I was paving the way for people who did look like me, who were coming behind. And so it was okay to be the first. It was okay to not know what the end result was going to be, because there was other people that I didn't even know, generations that are not even here now, that would have somebody to look like them. And for me, that was really important. And it was inspired by people that were not even a part of my own community. And so why did I say yes to that early proposal in math, right? Well, I felt like God gifted me the talent to nurture me. And it was something that it was meant for my life. And I didn't want to let go of that opportunity. I felt like the natural struggle taught me to focus on the process and not to think about the solution, because the solution is just one thing. The process is the beautiful art piece that you actually get to take with you, right? And that will help you to propel in other situations. The truth is, life is about the knowns and unknowns, right? What I have in my power and what I know now, and then figuring out the things that I don't know, that I don't have experiences about. And so math really allowed me to see it in the bigger picture as well. And what I know is that if you stick with it, something great will happen, right? I stuck around long enough to say, man, math is really an incredible thing. And it has opened up so many doors in my life, and I would never change that relationship. So for anyone who's listening, just remember, find your passion. I really hope the math is it. I love seeing people in my field and just creating that passion inside of them. But whatever it is, stick to it, right? Love what you do. Fall in love with the entire process so that you're able to really understand it, right? It's like that puzzle that you're putting together. And when you see that final picture, it's just that beautiful moment that shows you why it was worth it all along. And then make an impact. Everything we do is about people who are coming behind us. Nothing that we do is truly for us, right? We're paving the way for people that can't see their own result and can't see themselves one step further away. And the more that we are willing to sacrifice, the more that that road opens up for others. So even though my journey hasn't always been easy, and sometimes I truly have felt less than enough, I would still say yes. I would never trade this journey for anything else, because I truly believe that it has been the reason that I have become the woman that I am today. And when I look at my daughters and when I look at my sons, I always tell them, like, pursue everything with a passion, regardless of how hard it feels. And one piece of advice that I can give parents right now is, our culture tells us there's a certain way to raise daughters and a certain way to raise sons. And that's also true in the mathematics field, right? We create pathways by giving Legos to boys and by giving dolls to girls. And we're doing a disservice to our children at a very young age. So allow them to explore, allow your daughters to take toys apart and put them together, to look at Legos, to look for patterns, to look for things that are outside of that gender realm, to really develop their three-dimensional thinking, because those things will help them and will propel them to be better scientists in the future, to be better engineers in the future, and to have a mathematical thinking pattern. And so it starts then, right? It starts at the very, very, very core of our elementary years, and then it builds from there. So now that you get to know a little bit about me and my journey and why I'm so passionate about math, I do want to give you some great ways and some strategies for you to be able to fall in love with math yourself. So I'm not sure who is here, right? Whether we have parents or we have students or a mixture of both, but regardless, there is a way that we can look at math to make it fun. And so before I go into the details of elementary and middle school and high school, what I want you to think about is the things you like to do, right? Whether it's shopping or cooking or building or sports or analysis. Like there's so many things and so many passions we have. And the truth is math can be incorporated into all. And so one of the messages that I want you to keep from this presentation is how do you take what you already love and how do you pour math into it so that your kids or yourself feel more comfortable? Because a problem planted in a different way, even if the pathway to the solution is exactly the same, will make a difference, right? And so what do I mean by that? A student who's in New York, who's used to a subway, who doesn't really understand farming, when you give a problem adding or subtracting in a farm, it's foreign to them. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't connect because that's not their world. But if I can give that same type of problem and just relate it to what their everyday life looks like, right? To taking a subway, to buying a car, to seeing how quickly the train goes, when it stops, like now they have a relatable experience. And that's what you want to do with the math. You want to make it relatable to the audience. And so you want to always think, whether it's your child or yourself, what do I like and what do I want to know about? And then let's take the math concepts and incorporate it so that I'm able to kind of find that bridge between the two and make it a memorable math experience. So we are going to do our best to bring math alive, right? And so how do we do that? We try to make it hands-on. We talked about you use at an elementary level picture books or things that really can create a picture in their head for the student, right? Something that makes sense. You play games. Our students are very much into technology. You can use technology at all levels, whether it's math bingo or Minecraft when you're talking to a middle schooler, or even taking NBA 2K and turning it into something that's mathematical. Like you have the ability to really take all of these things and show students how math is incorporated. You encourage math talk, right? So when you're speaking to students, when you're cooking and you're talking about proportions, you're talking about measuring cups, like all of these things really will encourage the math talk, and it helps students to then see math outside of just a classroom, right? And the more they can relate to it, the more comfortable they will become in having math in their life. And then you ask questions, inquire, ask how they're doing things, ask the student to teach you, allow them to switch roles and become the teacher and just learn, right? A lot of times that is how a student can best identify anything that they don't know or any potential holes they have in the math. And then again, we have the internet, we have iPads for a lot of our students, we have computers, so you guys can turn almost anything into a game. I remember my son, my oldest son, who's now 12, when he was 3 or 4 years old, I used to play math bingo. And he thought it was the coolest thing ever because it was a bingo game, right? It's an app called Math is Fun. And literally, he was trying to solve. And initially, he didn't understand addition, he didn't understand subtraction. But over time, he understood that there were some patterns. Over time, that game taught him how to add and subtract. Over time, it became multiple operations. And so if we utilize these things that kids are excited about, then we can turn them into a learning experience. So we're going to tackle the 3 different levels and really just talk slightly about some activities and some things that you can do to really bring math to life, right? So for elementary kids, they like hands-on stuff. They like to explore, they like experiments, they want to be able to kind of bring math literally alive, right? So I have a few games that you can really play with an elementary child, and you can take it to whichever level you want, right? So this is appropriate for a 1st grader, and it is also appropriate for a 5th grader. So first one is putt-putt. So what you do is you take literally a box. This is a Kleenex box, but you can use any of it. And you put cups in it that have certain values. And then you have your child with like mini golf, or you can use like really almost any kind of ball, and have them try to get a putt put in, right? 1, 2, or 3. And then you see who can get the most points, right? So they're tallying up different points and then seeing, this is a game, right? So you'll have 2 people and then you see which one can get more. The trick is they're adding as they go, right? So if the first person goes and gets a 2, And then the next person goes and gets a 3. Then the next person will go and they get a 1. So they're adding 2 plus 1. And so they're practicing the skills, right? Very, very basic skills. If you move it to the 5th grade, you can multiply, you can divide, you can have multiple operations go, and it makes it really fun and engaging for students. We can take classical games that we know everything about. Who does not like Twister? It's super fun. You can do it as a family activity. And then all that you do is you put numbers. You take sticky notes and you put numbers on there. And then you're doing problems. So maybe I say, what's 2 plus 3? And so the answer would be 5. And they're having to put left hand on that particular answer, right? You can do it with subtraction, with addition, with multiplication, division. You can really take this to the highest of levels, and it allows the students to participate, use their brain, and use their body, right? So we want to keep them active as well. So it's a great way to take a family night and turning into something interactive and still math-based. Our next one is bowling. So we all love to bowl. And of course, if you were actually bowling, you would try to get all the pins down. Well, you strategically put numbers on the pins so that the student can score a higher level of points. So, and I would, anytime that I've done this, I switch the points up so that they start thinking about where they should actually hit the pins to get the most points. And so they will roll the ball. You can use a beach ball, you can use any other ball really. And then when they fall down, you have them add, right? But they have to do the adding or the subtracting, however you play the game. And then if they get it wrong, they don't get the points, right? So you are going to have to do some addition yourself, right? So either you have a calculator or you have to be quick on that adding and subtracting. But this gets them, again, excited, moving, and they're practicing some of those basic skills on an elementary level, and also strategy, right? Because if you switch the points around, the student has to start thinking about how to roll the ball so that it hits the maximum amount of points, right? So now you're talking about geometry, you're talking about critical thinking, you're talking about lines and slopes, concepts that maybe they're not going to know now, but things that will help them as they develop in their mathematics career. And then the last one at an elementary level that we have is an active game where you can take just balls that they have in like the ball pits, and then you assign a specific value to each of them. And you take a basket and you kind of put them across. So this can be done in your backyard. It can be done in your front lawn. And the students are racing back and forth to get balls into their particular pits. And then they don't know the point assignment to it yet. So you're rolling and then they want to get the most amount of points, right? Some alternative ways to do this is that they can also take away from whoever they're racing. And so you kind of incorporate both that adding and subtracting. And then because you have the same colors, you can always do multiplication, right? So the same value is true for every single ball that has the same color. So instead of doing repetitive addition, we can then incorporate multiplication. And so again, fun ways to kind of move around, move your body, but then at the same time, be able to learn some mathematics. So these are just a couple of examples that you can use at an elementary level. And there's so much more. And so one of the things I want to encourage you is go online, look up Math is Fun, games, interactive games for kids, especially now where, you know, our whole world went on a computer. There's an endless list of activities that you can find. You can find a lot of these on Pinterest. You can find it on the internet. Most of them are free. And so you'll have like step-by-step guides on how to do this with your kids. And so if you're not a math person, even though I believe everyone is, but if you consider yourself a non-math person, like you can probably find things that are literally step-by-step so that that anxiety of not knowing the math kind of goes away. But I think it's also a great opportunity for you to be involved with your kids and you learn some of the things that they are going to learn. One of the things I will share is with Common Core, one of the goals for the mathematics in general is to be able to really spiral the mathematics starting at an elementary level and create a deeper understanding. And so the more that we are comfortable with math, the more that we're going to be able to support our young kids as they interact with math in a very different way than we did, okay? Because it really is looking for understanding and not just algorithms. Okay, then we move on to middle school. And so in middle school, our math is taken up a slight level. We're looking at integers, we're looking at slopes, introduction to algebra, a little bit of geometry. And middle schoolers are a little tough because the games can kind of go yay or nay, depending on the group. I would say definitely 7th and 8th graders, they get a little tough on that fun stuff because they're going through life and they're in a period of your life, but you can still get excited. And one thing that kids love and we love is food. And so you can always think about food as an avenue to creating this space so that it's fun for them. The other thing that they love to do is spend money and shop. So you can take those experiences and really turn them into critical learning pieces by showing them how a discount works, how tax works, by showing them how to take, 20% for tip, right? Creating those tools where rather than you pulling out a calculator, you're using the idea of a decimal point and moving it over to the left one time, multiplying by 2. Like all of those are critical skills that we will use in life, and you can begin to teach them at that time. I used to play this game with my son, again, my oldest one, who got all the math when he was by himself. And I would say, like, you have to calculate the discount and you have to calculate, the tax if you want this item. And so he was all about, and some days I had to come out of pocket. Like he was really good. So, but you can make it excited for them, and you can use it as a strategy to get your, pre-teenagers, which are really tough, and your early teenagers to get involved and enjoy the math. So here are a few activities that you can do with them. The first one really introduces 3D shapes, and it talks about tetrahedrons. It talks about, pyramids like cubes, and essentially use marshmallows and you use toothpicks, and you get a certain amount of toothpicks, a certain amount of marshmallows that are matched, and you have them create different shapes, right? And you could take this from a very like guided sort of activity to an open-ended, what can you create? Like build me the tallest blank. And so students can get really creative. I've done models like this where they're replicating actual buildings and using the same system. And then you talk about ratios and proportions and some of those concepts. So I think anything that's fun. If you want to use something different than marshmallows, you can use fruit. You can use like literally anything. You can use gumball sometimes. You can get as creative as you want to create the shapes. And it really helps them to understand that transfer between a 2D model and a 3D model, and how you can begin with one and end with the other. And keeping in the theme of food, percentages and decimals and ratios, they're a big part of the curriculum in the 6th and 7th grade. And so you can always take this idea and utilize, whether it's M&Ms or Skittles. I like Skittles. They're very colorful and you can bring them out, but you can talk about percents, right? You can have them talk about probability. If you have a bag of Skittles and you pick 5 random Skittles, what's the probability that's going to be an orange, a green, a yellow, a red, right? So you allow a lot of this discrete mathematics foundation to come to life. And of course, you can eat them at the end. So it's always great. You can allow pie charts to be a part of that. You can do bar graphs with it. You see on the screen right now, it's a pie graph that really relates all of the 3, the decimal point, the percentage, and then the ratio. And so it really gives a connection among all of it in a great visual, and you can eat the candy after. So it's always a great way to hit this. This is a very similar kind of game, but it talks about mean, median, and mode, which are some of the basics for statistics that you'll see. So what happens the most, what happens in the middle if you line up your data, and then sort of what your average is. And so this is like a way that you can really get the students involved in understanding those measures of central tendency that come. Statistics is huge. Statistics will be used throughout their entire math career. And so if you can get that basis and make it fun for them, they'll learn how to explore bigger things, bigger data, and just become comfortable. And so this is just a set of a game that you can do. I use Skittles again because I just like Skittles, but you can use M&Ms, you can use just about any candy. Starburst is another great one. One of the things I will say when we're considering kids that have special needs and kids that have, visual impairments, then you can think about different shapes, right? And so a lot of times when we're doing these activities, we focus on things that look the same because they're different colors. But I want you to think about some alternative ways that you can reach students that maybe have specific needs. So my son, he has cerebral palsy, and there's things that are tactical about that I have to take in consideration. And so when I do an activity, I have to keep that mind frame, right? Like, how do I reach the person that I'm trying to reach? And so as a parent, like, all of these activities, you can alternate them and make them work for your student, right? So whether that is a color impairment or some other things, like, you can change it up so that it works for you and they're still really engaged. And then I love this activity, and you really could do this at an elementary level and you can do it at a high school level. So you have some pretzels, you have some marshmallows, you have some crackers. And what this can represent at an elementary level, which I know we already did elementary, but just so you know, this is your hundreds blocks, your 10 blocks, your unit blocks, right? When you're talking about placement, right? And what a number represents, this is a great way to bring that same concept to life. And if you're at the middle school level, this is like algebra tiles, right? So algebra tiles depict your X values, your X squares, your unit values, and they allow you to learn how to add and multiply unknowns, right? When you introduce variables, and you can use this exactly the same way, right? So you kind of create your premise for what each thing stands for, and then you utilize it as a way to engage your students slightly more than you would with the regular algebra tiles. And of course, you can have a snack when you're done. So it's always a great way. Food is always a good way to get to the people's heart. And so if you can incorporate math and food, I think it's a win. And last but not least, we get to this high schoolers. And so in high school, you got to kind of take it up a notch, right? Because students now are a little bit over the games and they want to get a little more intricate, and they're looking for more things to kind of engage them. And so I always like to go even beyond what the classroom teaches. And so the first thing I have is this idea of codes, right? A lot of our students are into computers, and if we're able to show them how the computers are coded in different systems, I think they get really excited about things that they can explore. One of my favorite fields in math is cryptography, which is the idea of deciphering and enciphering codes. And essentially, you turn letters into numbers, create an equation to relate different numbers to each other, and then turn them back into letters, right? So maybe I say like XYAD, and that actually means love. And it's because I have a coding system that allows for that translation. But it's really intricate and it's really cool. I've actually taught it from 7th grade up, and students can absorb a lot more than we think. And so it's a great, great way to really get them thinking and get them kind of using the math at a higher level with a higher skill. And then we can just utilize, for high schoolers, things that they're interested about, like projects that they want to know something about. So whether that is doing research on fashion, or doing research on sports, or doing research on other things, you can use statistics, right? And you can kind of bring it in for them to be able to see how it relates. So having like that personal connection to the student at a high school level, I think is critical. I think it's really, really, really important for them to be able to connect. Now, my favorite of them all, investment, financial literacy. Your student will love talking about money. They love, love, love hearing that ching, ching. And so you can use that in order to teach them concepts that honestly are going to be essential for the rest of their life. So what are some things you can do? You can talk about savings accounts. You can talk about investments. You can actually do real-time investment, which I think is a great thing to do with high schoolers, where they take, $10, $5, and they invest it into the stock market. There are actual apps that you can use for this, and they can see how it's growing, and they can see how it decreases. They can talk about chance and what are some good stocks to invest in and where are some not to, right? You can talk about how you can take a savings account and how you can grow that savings account. What does a penny a day do for you over a 10-year period? How can you utilize your savings so that they actually make money for you rather than just stay stagnant, right? What's the difference between me saving $10 under my mattress, like our, grandparents probably did, and me taking that $10 and maybe investing it in a CD in a bank, right? And then what the repercussions of that looks like. And so I think it's important for them to know these things. And there's such great apps and great ways that you can show your kids how to learn how to be financial literal. And I think it's important for them to have that skill because, at least in my case, my mom did not have those skills. My grandmother did not have those skills. And so we don't learn about generational wealth. We don't learn about creating our own wealth and how to invest, right? We learn about what we have and then how to spend it or how to save it, right? That concept of under the mattress. And so math really can open this up to students and they can see, okay, what kind of loan should I get? What percent is good? How long should this loan be? What kind of, if you're talking about interest, is it simple interest? Is it compound interest? Is it continuous compound? Which one makes a difference? When should I get into this investments? Like those are real life applications that students really benefit from. And then the last one is like sports. Analytics and data-driven sports is huge, huge, huge right now. And so if you take things that students like basketball, football, baseball, and you teach them through something that they're passionate about, how to take analytics and it be a part of the equation, I think you have great success at a high school level, right? So you teach a student how to measure the arc for which they're shooting, what the percentage of shots made versus shots taken, how to compare players, right? We talk about the greatest of all time. If you're talking basketball and there's a debate on, is it Jordan? Is it LeBron? Was it Kobe? Like, how do you actually statistically look at this and say, here's my argument for why? And so I think anytime that it relates to the students and some of their passions, students are open. Their heart is open to learning about the math and they get a skill that is going to help them for the rest of their life, right? And so you want to really take what they love and then hone it down and allow the math to be a part of that equation. And so in conclusion, just know it's all about what they love, right? Math is so broad that the intricacies of it, all of the curves, the lines, everything that we know about math can really be incorporated into any field. And so the more that we engage our students in the topic, in their area of interest, the more that they will love math and be less afraid of it. We're one of the only countries in the world where you can high five somebody for hating math. That's not acceptable. We should not be high-fiving anyone for not doing well in math. We should change the way we teach math so that we can engage those that are not comfortable in it. Okay, math is everywhere. It's just about looking for it, right? Looking for it hard enough so that you can apply those skills. And there's so many resources online. Literally anything that you want to try at home, there's a resource for. So don't be afraid to just go on Safari and type in whatever topic you're interested in. I'm sure that you'll be able to find something. I hope that this was helpful and that you got a little overview of how you can bring math to life. I would love to engage with you and answer any questions. And thank you so much for just allowing me to share a piece of my journey and some of the things that I'm extremely passionate about. So I don't know if we have questions that we can take. If anybody has any questions about anything you heard today.
Yeah, got a good question. What are some of the common, I guess, common hurdles you see like with homeschooling children?
A lot of it is parents being unwilling to do things different than they knew, right? So we come from an era, right? And I'm going to talk about my generation. So I'm 37 years old, I'll be 38. And even in my young schooling, like we come from a sort of algorithm-based teaching where we're taught a certain method, right? But we didn't necessarily learn why it worked, right? Or in what situations it worked. We were very limited by the way we were teaching, so that we were being taught. So let me give an example. In elementary, a lot of times we hear, like, when you're subtracting, big number minus little number, big number minus little number. So as a kid, that's all you internalize, big number minus little number, right? The premise of that, when we do that, how we do that, it was never taught. Why is that important? Because that is actually only true before you learn integers. When you learn integers, that is no longer true. The big number doesn't have to go on top. And in fact, it hurts you to think about it that way, right? So as parents, because we learn that way and we don't necessarily know the why, when our students bring something home, our kids bring something home, that they're showing them blocks to add, or they have, a blank +3 = 7, and you're drawing, all of these blocks and really looking at the why things work, we struggle to identify with it. And so we try to tell them just our way. But then we have a clash because our students didn't learn it that way, right? And so I think one of the things as parents you have to do is you have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to relearn some of the things that you were taught, understanding that this is a different system. And in fact, I would dare to say, like, Common Core is a lot better for our kids, but we're not going to see the repercussions of that until they go through the entire system with Common Core, right? We change systems too often. And so then you have all these broken pieces. But I think that that's the issue with homeschool. A lot of parents are afraid of math. They only know it one way. They want to teach a shortcut to a student. And then the student's like, I don't know how that works. It doesn't make sense to them. So we have to relearn it. And that's, I think, tough.
That's very interesting. When you talk about relearning, because I think that that's one of the biggest hurdles a lot of parents go through is relearning everything. And I think as you get older, it gets harder to really be like, wait a minute, everything I learned is supposed to be learned another way, or should be learned another way, or can be learned another way.
Right.
I think that that's a big hurdle that kind of stunts people with their growth mindset as well. Not understanding, like, yes, there's a million ways to do one thing, and every few years, it evolves.
Absolutely.
And so going towards that evolving thing, where do you see math going in the next like 5 to 10 years?
Oh, I love that question. So I definitely believe math will continue to evolve. I don't think mathematicians will ever be replaced, right? So we talk about the computer. Obviously, a computer can do what I can do in my head much faster, but the computer requires for someone to still intricately put in the work so that it can do it, right? So you still need a thinking tank. You still need someone who understands the processes and who's able to identify where to guide the math. And so I do believe, however, that we are going towards a much, much more technology driven subject, right? Where we have to really change the way we teach so that the things a computer can do are done by a computer, are done by an app, are done by a calculator. We're not so afraid of it, but we are still teaching in such a way that we're conceptualizing the mathematics, right? So for example, what I can do now, so there's a program called Geometry Sketchpad, right? Where you literally can move along any line or any radius, you can move a point, right? And so if I'm trying to generalize a concept, and 10 years ago, or even when I started teaching 15 years ago, I would have to do like 5 or 6 different examples, right? And sometimes the students got that it was general for anything. So let's say Pythagorean theorem, but sometimes they didn't because I can only think about a certain type of example, right? But now with technology, I can literally move a point in 100 million directions, and those relationships that are true will remain true. So it's much easier to generalize concepts for students because I have the ability to use the technology to then move things around and create those parallels, right? So I do think, like, as mathematicians, we have to be comfortable with technology. We have to say, how do I best use technology to then teach concepts and make others comfortable, right, in there. And one of the things I think we're going to need to do, and I teach teachers, right, students who are in college who want to be math educators. I have those classrooms as well. And one of the things I tell them all the time is you need to know where the math came from and when the math is going. It's not sufficient for you to know the math that you're teaching, because you're doing a disservice. You need to know exactly where it came from. So every student that has a hole in math that came before, you can identify and you know how to get them to where you are. And you need to know where it's going so that you never limit the information that a student is exposed to, because math is related all the way through the curriculum. The issue is a lot of people teaching it don't know those connections. So we now have to incorporate it. We have to become friends. We have to become one with technology. We have to explore technology. We have to be comfortable so that as math grows, we utilize the things that we have to really be able to explore math in a much more intricate way. So I think it's technology driven for sure. That's where it's gone.
That leads into the next question. That's perfect. So I'm studying math. I'm in one of your classes and I'm about to graduate.
Okay.
I don't want to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What are 3 to 5 alternative jobs that I could be successful with math?
Okay, great question. So one of the main things that is happening right now is analytics, right? So NBA and NFL, literally all of these professional athletes and everything, they're going into analytics to be able to really dissect the way that the game is played. I can tell you actually from a personal experience, Marshall University, whose basketball coach is Dan D'Antoni, who used to coach in the NBA, as an assistant coach, he has restructured his entire program to be based on analytics. And hence the way that he coaches has changed because he's relying a lot more on the 3-point shot, outside shooting, because that can create more wings based on what analytics tell you, right? And so this is jobs that are newly created. So data analysis is huge. That's literally. But the other thing that people don't know is almost every single company has a mathematician in their field, because something else that we do is model. So we can create models to predict how products are cost effective, how they're going to do in the market, to look at the supply and demand. Like all of that is done by mathematicians. So if you tell me the goal is for me to, make $1 million in 10 years, what kind of modeling system do I need in terms of product cost and everything else? I can create those models, right, with a math degree. I know how to do that. Currently, I have people who I know who are colleagues that work at SAS, that work for American Express, doing models for how people spend their money, how much money comes in and out. So you have that opportunity. In addition, architects, right? So when you think about geometry, when you think about design, that is a mathematician's intricate sort of brain being processed in an application. And so I really think almost any company utilizes a mathematician on team. Now, one thing to know is we don't go into a team by ourselves, right? So when you go into these companies and you're looking at the think tank, you're looking at someone who has a scientist, a mathematician, an engineer, and the process as a whole is what creates the beauty that you're creating, right? So it's not just a mathematician or just a scientist, it's how they are interconnected. I always say we're the foundation. Because when you talk about physics, when you talk about chemistry, when you talk about the stuff, if you don't understand the math, none of those are true, right? For engineers, all of this engineering basis, they come from a mathematician. And so I think that that's where you will see all of these things. We just don't talk about it, right? We think it's just academia, but in reality, there's so many jobs that are open for mathematicians.
See, that's great, because when I think of math, especially in like real world jobs and stuff like that, beyond like the teaching, I think of, have you seen a movie, Hidden Figures?
Yes, of course. Of course.
So when I think of math, I think of like, wow, I need to get this big old chalkboard, but now it's been like, all right, now I can do it on my phone.
Yeah.
And another good example of a good movie that has math that you alluded to was Moneyball with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
That's the movie with where they first really start implementing the analytics into sports. And they built the whole oh man, I forgot the name of the team. I forgot the state. It's athletics. But they built their whole team, the Oakland Athletics, Oakland A's.
Yeah.
So they built their whole team that year on analytics, and they did very well, you know, and that kind of started the whole trend
Yeah.
of like Carmelo Anthony. For all those sports fans out there, Carmelo Anthony was in the Houston Rockets. He played 10 games and they released him. And the reason why they released him is because they did 10-game analytics.
Right.
So after those 10 games, they ran the analytics and were like, hey, according to these 10-game analytics, this is not going to work out.
Right.
You know, and they kind of moved him across, but
Yeah.
he wound up in another team and now he's doing really good.
Right.
So analytically, he didn't work out for that team, but
Right.
it fit well with another team. So got another good question.
Yeah.
So what I think is good.
They've been great.
I'm thinking of the Marvel universe, right?
Uh-huh.
Where in the Marvel universe can I apply mathematics, or where is there a good example of mathematics being applied?
Oh, yeah, you're hitting me with a hard one because I'm not as familiar. Well, I mean, so Black Panther, right, would be like what I would think about immediately because you have this technology and you're very science driven and stuff. I wish I was more familiar and then I can tell you all about it, but I am not. But I think anything, right? Anything that requires critical thinking, right? There's a problem. You need to solve a problem. So in order to solve that problem, you need to think about what you know, what you don't know, and what relationships are aligned between those two, right? And what I just described is an algebra process, literally, right? It's what am I being asked? What do I know? Numbers. What do I not know? X's and Y's. And how do I relate the quantities I know to the ones that I don't know, right? So I think even if whether it's Marvel or anything else, the idea, that process of thinking, critically thinking to a problem, that is the main skill you learn as a mathematician. You learn how to plant a problem, how to identify where you need to go, and how to figure out the bridges, the connections between the things you know and the things you don't know.
Amazing. So before we go, this is part where we start to wrap up.
Yes.
What advice do you have for parents and maybe even new teachers, right? With kids who are coming in and saying, math is hard, I can't learn math. It's just not something I can learn. Like what are some key terms or some key advice that you could give them, like to help motivate those kids or even the parents? Because I come across a lot of parents, like we spoke about a little earlier, where math is not my thing. You're gonna have to learn it in school or something of that nature. Like,
Right.
what advice can you give to them, like in a quick, like, elevator pitch?
Elevator pitch. So one, math is hard, but so is life, right? So something being hard shouldn't deter you from pursuing it. Two, make sure you're reaching your student where they're at. Okay. Expectations have to be matched with the right support. So it's important for you to to know where they're at and to start there. Progress is what you're looking for, not results, right? So you can't go from A to Z. You need to start from A and go to B. And for parents, for you to be comfortable with math, you are going to have to put in the work too. The same expectations that we give students, we have to put in ourselves. The good news is there's a lot of things online. There's like Math for Dummies, literally, like you can go in and just see how to meet your student where they are. And then the last thing, literally, what do they like to do? What is it that they are passionate about? And turning a problem with that subject, like literally a regular math out of the book problem, but putting it attached to something they like, will switch the way they're looking at that math problem. And that is all you need. You need them to be open enough to the math that they're willing to struggle through the process. And students can do it. We just have to change their mindset.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea. Betty, you have any questions? Some closing questions?
No, that was it. That was great. I was just gonna ask, like, what should I do with my son? And you just answered it right there. Like, just use something that they like so that they can, go through that process. So that was actually a good ending point. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. How can people get in contact with you, or is it do you have a website or anything?
I don't have a website, but I do have an email. It's actually my last name. So Duhon, Duhon .Andrea, Andrea @gmail.com. And so if you need resources, if you need some tips, like specifically for your child, please reach out. I love to hear from people. And when it comes to math, I go above and beyond. So I would love to be in touch with you.
Amazing. Thank you, Andrea. Um, that concludes the power of community, the fun in math. Join us next week, everybody, with Dr. Yasmin Daniels. We're going over the strategies for becoming a successful STEM student. So we're going to be discussing and providing key tools to enable young adults to become successful in their academic and eventual professional world using STEM pursuits. And, really diving into what it takes to be successful in that field, not only academically, but mentally as well. And making sure that we cover a lot of questions, go over a lot of things. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you join us next week, 1 o'clock Saturday. And thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a good week.